Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. An estimated 40% of agricultural workers in the U.S. are undocumented. As such, worksite immigration raids in Arizona and the U.S. are making for instability in farming operations and fear in farm working communities. Here to tell us more is Edward Vargas. He's from ASU's School of Trans-Border Studies. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Ted, for having me.
You betcha. All right, let's take a 30,000-foot view here as far as immigration raids and the impact on farms and eventually on what we get at the grocery store.
Yeah, so fundamentally, whenever there's uncertainty, a lot of things happen. We know that people's fear of going to work, people scared of taking their children to school, people not knowing what's going to happen next week, ultimately has an impact on labor and labor productivity in all industries. If we look specifically at agriculture, you can think of agriculture and sort of there's the trucking sort of world of moving product. There's the cow industry, sort of dairy industry world of farming. There is, of course, the green leaves, the rock fruits, and so fishing, all kind of wrapped into one. But what we do know is that around 40,000, about 40 to 45,000 farms. We're losing about 45,000 farms a year. Last year, I got to do a stint at the USDA and got to kind of look underneath the hood in terms of what's going on in the sort of agricultural industry. And what we're beginning to see is just really just a loss of farms and farmlands.
Those losses, the loss of farms, how much is immigration playing a part in that?
Well, that's part of it, immigration clearly, but it's also just sort of market forces in terms of small farms that maybe didn't want to get a little bit bigger because of the fear of labor shortages, and so sort of just the change in the movement of large industrial farming.
I mentioned 40%, and estimated somewhere around 40% of agricultural workers in the U.S. are undocumented. Does that ring true to you? Does that sound about right?
That's about what estimates say, and some recent work actually done by the USDA and Migration Policy Institute estimate around that number. Again, when we talk about documented or undocumented, it's a little unclear in those numbers. Meaning, if you're an H-2A worker, for example, do you count that as an undocumented worker, or you count that as a documented worker? It becomes to get really kind of blurry.
Yeah. Okay, ICE agents, are they targeting farms? Are they targeting farm workers?
Ted, what we know is that agriculture and labor, there's always been an open secret that people are undocumented and working on these farms. We did see some raids happening in around Camarillo, California, in strawberry fields, where you had agents chasing laborers through strawberry fields. That did happen. But in general, I think there's been a lot of pushback and a lot of concern, and so people have been kind of staying away. Again, it's an open secret that we're hiring these workers.
Yeah, but as far as the raids themselves, are crops not being picked? Are fields being left dry? I mean, is A, and B, when is if that's happening, is that going to affect us, and when?
Yes, it is happening. What we're seeing is, one, farmers having to diversify how they're picking fruit. So this push to automation is really what they're looking into. How do we diversify if we don't have people to pick? Now, again, I said that there's different types of fruits and vegetables. So when we look at rock fruits, the fruits such as pears, fruits such as blueberries, blackberries, strawberries that are very, you need hands to pick these things. What we're seeing is that people are either thinking about secondary markets for these products. In other words, they're rotting away in these fields. So how can we repurpose them into other products? We're sort of seeing that happening. We're also seeing farmers rethinking about how much harvest, how much they're going to be planning for the next couple of years.
Arizona, compare Arizona to other areas. It seems like ICE, I don't know, is ICE targeting certain regions? Is Arizona included?
Well, that's a really great point. Arizona is really different than other places, specifically places that have the largest number of undocumented workers, such as California, Oregon, Texas, Florida, which again, they produce a lot of sort of fruits that require hand picking, where in Arizona, we've had a longer established relationship with folks over on the other side in San Luis to be able to bring in workers. But again, they are experiencing labor shortages. And that's been true for the last couple of decades.
Okay, so the raids are happening, and it's kind of hard to figure out exactly when, where, why, and how, but they are happening. President Trump, though, said that he was not going to target certain industries, including agriculture, meatpacking, and these kinds of things as well. Is that not happening?
Well, it's happened across the country. There's accounts happening, for example, in Wisconsin, in dairy farms. We know that one of the first executive orders was on an English-only law. Why this matters is because in the construction driving rigs, there are a large majority of people who are non-English speakers, native speakers. So it sort of trickles down into other parts of the agricultural economy that we don't really think about.
Yeah, I want to get back to what you mentioned as far as people being upset and worried and fearful and not doing things, picking kids up from school. Also, are we seeing any evidence that they're not reporting crimes? That was always a big deal, that crime would go underground because people would be too afraid to either report or testify.
That's right. We call this in the literature the chilling effect. In other words, people not engaging, whether they're hospitals, reporting crime. And a recent poll done by a group of researchers, me being one of these folks, LINA studies, and you can find this at the Brookings Institution where I published this. We find Latinos not, for example, wanting to go get their new medications, not going to see the doctor, fearful that their children could be left alone if they got picked up. So there is concerns. I think what we also have to note is just how diverse these families are. So you have individuals in this household who are U.S. citizens, but who may have an undocumented parent. We know that even permanent residents can be picked up and deported, and that's happening.
Okay, last question then. Where is all this headed?
This is headed very negatively. What we know is that people not coming to the U.S., and this is very reminiscent of 2008 in terms of people self-deporting and the anti-immigrant movement that was happening in that period. And what happened right after 2008? We had a crash. So there's a lot of indicators, and they say, for example, the purchasing of spaghetti is a large indicator of what's to come, and we see that the purchasing of spaghetti has just skyrocketed.
Wow, a spaghetti index. Who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah, so watch out for that. We should mention 2008, though. Real estate was a big part
Real
of that.
estate was in Arizona. Know this better than anybody. And what we do see in the construction industry, we have seen much more raids in the construction industry.
Interesting. All right, well, keep an eye on it. Dr. Edward Vargas, again, ASU School of Transborder Studies. Always a pleasure, sir. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.